Normally I would sort of move around on this sermon, but I'm going to stay right where I am and try to not get in front of the speaker. Today is Baptism of the Lord's Sunday, and traditionally it's the day that I talk about baptism. You know, as the United Methodist, I believe I read somewhere in the discipline that says that I'm to instruct the church on the sacraments. Well, today it's your instruction time for baptism. When we think about baptism within the United Methodist Church, we do refer to it as a sacrament. The traditional definition of a sacrament is an outward and visible sign, that is the water, the actions that happen, the things that's going on, of an inward and spiritual grace. In other words, something is happening inside us that we can't see and quite comprehend as we undergo the action of baptism itself. Within the United Methodist Church, baptism is one of two sacraments. Holy Communion is the other sacrament. Holy Communion is a sacrament that is repeatable. As often as you engage in it, you engage in it. But baptism is a sacrament that's sort of a one-time kind of deal. Once you are baptized, there is no need to be baptized again, because we believe that the action that takes place within baptism is not something that begins on the human side of the equation. If you think of God on one side and humans on the other, it doesn't begin on the human side of the equation. Baptism is an action that we believe begins on the God side of the equation. That when baptism happens, it's not something that we as humans are doing, but rather it's something that God is doing to us. And therefore, it is God's grace that is given in such a way that we receive the sacrament. And once God gives the sacrament of baptism to us for the first time, God doesn't need to come back in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 50 years and do it again. God got it right the first time. And so that's one of the things that we need to sort of keep in mind when we think about baptism. Baptism is not about us. It's about God and the covenant that God forms with us. And we are reminded that through baptism, we are incorporated into Christ's body, and that we are made part of the universal church, but that doesn't mean that we are saved. Within Methodism, salvation does not come through baptism. I don't think salvation comes through baptism for anybody that I know of, with just about any denomination. But salvation comes only through Jesus Christ. Baptism, though, becomes the sign of the covenant, that we are sort of marked and that we are sort of incorporated into God's family. And that's one reason we baptize infants. The scriptures say, don't tarry the little ones for coming to me. Don't prevent them from coming. They're a part of the family as much as anyone else. But at some point, every infant that's baptized is going to have to make his or her own public profession of faith. And so we as Methodists believe that infants can be baptized, that baptism does not bring them salvation, that one day they have to make their own profession of faith. As adults, we believe in baptism as well for adults. Adults can be baptized as a symbol of their repentance of sin, but then again, it doesn't start with them. It starts and ends with God. And so baptism becomes that sacrament that helps us to understand what God is doing by creating this body. We die and we rise into a new life and through the waters of baptism. May not have done a good job of explaining that, so that's why now you get to ask questions. And the ones that I can't answer, I have a district superintendent sitting over here. He will be glad to answer them on my behalf and on behalf of the church. What kind of questions do you have about baptism? Here's where the sermon either goes long or short. Okay, Bill, what's your question about baptism?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll repeat it.
Okay. You said baptized once.
Baptized one time.
A baby.
A baby.
Is or is not christened, as the case may be.
When we don't christen, we baptize.
Okay, baptized. The child gets older, parents are gone or something, doesn't know whether or not he has been baptized. What's the situation there? Would you re-baptize him if that was the case?
I have to go on what the person tells me. And if they tell me that they have not been baptized or they have no record of them being baptized, then in that case, I would baptize them. But if I know they have been baptized, I cannot rebaptize someone. That's a chargeable offense within Methodism, and I could be defrocked.
The question is not that if I didn't know that I'd been baptized.
If you didn't know you'd been
I didn't
baptized,
know.
okay? Well, then I would baptize you if you don't know. If you don't know, then I would baptize you as an adult then. But if you know, then I can't do it, if you know for certain. Am I right on that one, Jeff? Okay. Got one nod from the DS. What else?
While we're on that same topic, and by the way, Rick, I've got my voice back now after the second year. Excuse me? We'll talk about it. Anyway, while we're on the same topic, because I've ran into this situation before, I've never talked about it because I didn't know what to ask, but I've seen before where if somebody goes from another denomination to another one, and then they are publicly baptized, like they go through the baptized process again. I mean, is that...
Okay, some within Methodism, if you've been baptized as a Baptist, a Lutheran, Episcopalian, it doesn't matter. If you've been baptized coming into the Methodist Church. Now, if you're baptized as a Methodist and move to another denomination, there are some denominations that see baptism as an initiation into the local church. So you would have to fall under their rules at that point. But coming from another denomination, if you've been baptized, we accept that baptism if it's from a Christian denomination.
Sprinkling, immersion.
We believe that it's not the amount of water that matters. There are three modes of baptism. Sprinkling, pouring, where you kneel down over a tub or something, I'll take a big picture and pour it over your head, or immersion. I've noticed that since I've been here, you all like to be immersed in the river. So I've done quite a few river baptisms. There will be none done until June. I'll just let you know that right now. It's cold enough in June. But June, July, August, September, we'll do some river baptisms if we need to do any. But the mode of baptism doesn't matter. It's not the amount of water, it's what the water symbolizes. Dottie?
As parents, and you take your child up to be baptized, the child is not the one making that decision. The parents are the ones saying, I will raise this child within the church and so forth. I mean, how does that differ from a person older making the decision themselves?
When parents bring their child forward to be baptized as an infant, that child is not cognizant or aware of what's going on. How does that differ from, say, someone who as an adult that's never been baptized wants to be baptized? One of the things that she also mentioned was there are a series of vows that are taken in which the parents are saying they are denouncing their sins, they are professing their faith in Jesus Christ, they are saying they will raise this child in a Christian atmosphere, and at the same point the church takes a similar kind of vow, saying that we will do all within our power to live out a life so that when a child looks at what the church is all about, this child will see Christ active. But the question goes back to, it doesn't matter whether it's a child or an adult, because it has nothing to do with us. All of it begins on God's side. God is the one that is doing something in baptism, whether it is a child or whether it's an 85-year-old adult that comes to the Lord for the first time. The sacrament is something that God does, and it is not necessary that the person get involved, so to speak, other than to go through the rite itself. Because the action, what happens, starts on God's side and affects us. What happens on our side is not going to change God. That may be the easiest way I can put it without going into a longer story. Jan?
You mentioned that we don't christen, we baptize. What is the difference?
Well, christening is literally the giving of a Christian name. You also christen battleships with a bottle of champagne, but we don't go whacking babies over the head with a bottle of champagne saying, I christen thee in the name of. But literally, the problem was, back in the 1950s, Methodism began drifting away from the sacramental understanding of what baptism was all about. And churches began to say, oh, we're going to christen the baby. And through the 50s, 60s, 70s, that stuff kept going and getting stronger. In the 80s, there was a reform movement within Methodism to try to get us back to a sacramental understanding. And we are still, in my opinion, dealing with teaching the correct understanding of what baptism is. It's not just simply a naming. It is an action of God in which God's Spirit is imparted to that child. And so that's why you won't hear me refer to it as a christening. You can't say we want to get our child christened. I'll say, I don't do christenings. I do baptisms. And I'll try to explain to them the difference. And if they still want to go through with it, then we will baptize the baby. If they said, well, that's not what I want to do, I want him to make his own choice when he gets older. That's their choice. But even when he gets older, it's still not something he's doing. It's still something that God's doing. Because the action is always from God's side towards us rather than from our side toward God. God has already shown us the covenant. God has already shown us what He's willing to do through Jesus Christ. And what that covenant then represents in baptism becomes a sign of what God has done through Christ. And it's reminding us of what God will do for all humanity. And see, it always starts on the God side rather than on the human side when it's a sacrament. Other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
With you saying that, when you say a remembrance, like you've got that bowl and that water there, and people could come up and wash their hands or
Do what they want.
or whatever. As a
Well, you're not going to hear me say the words, I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Well, but there is the deal. You would, if somebody who had been baptized as a baby wanted to experience that as an adult.
That's why we have the ritual for the reaffirmation of our baptismal vows, which all of us will have a chance to participate in. Yeah, we are reaffirming, but I am not rebaptizing today. You're not going to hear me say the words.
So it's not the action, though. See
It's-
what I'm saying? It's just a matter of wording versus action.
No, I don't see what you're saying. Because I'm not baptizing today. But I'm giving you a chance to remember your baptism, whether you were an infant or an adult, and to think about what those vows are, because we're going to take the vows. We're going to do everything that would have happened at a baptismal service, except you're not going to hear the preacher say, I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and call you by name. So it's
What's wrong with that? I mean, why is the church, what's wrong with that?
well, that's just the doctrine of the church, and as the pastor, I'm required to uphold the doctrine of the church, because, again, if we truly understand that baptism starts with God, then we as an individual, it doesn't matter what age we are or why we want to do it again. God has shown us through that act all that God needs to show us. And so God doesn't need to repeat the act. You going to pull me out of this one, Jeff? Oh, we've got a microphone.
The best way I would say it is that it is God's action, and God doesn't mess up. And if we repeat it, we're saying God messed up the first time, didn't get it right on us.
That's one way to put it. I'll agree with that one.
You're saying it's a matter of terms, baptism and reaffirmation.
Yeah, because we're not baptizing today. I'm going to provide you with a liturgy that will help you to remember what baptism is about, and to remind you what the baptismal vows were that were taken for you if you were an infant, or the vows that you took as an adult. Sort of like, every now and then couples will say, can we redo our wedding vows? I said, well, we can go through them again. You can say the words if you want to, if that's going to help you remember them and think about them better. But I'm not marrying them that second time, you see. And I'm not sort of like this. I'm not baptizing you this time. I'm simply helping you to remember what baptism is all about. And you can respond in whatever way you feel is appropriate to help you comprehend or remember or be thankful for the baptism you've undergone. Other questions? Bill?
I think one of the confusing things is if I was baptized as an infant and, like Dottie had said, not aware of what was happening, how do 15 or 20 years later, do I satisfy my profession of faith or my, what am I trying to say?
In other words, say as a teen, you want to make a public profession of faith.
Yeah.
And in your mind, you think that with the public profession of faith comes baptism. The two are linked. They're not.
Yeah.
We just say they aren't linked because you've already been baptized. The baptism part has already occurred. Now what's occurring is your profession of faith. If as an adult you've never been baptized and want to make a profession of faith, those two things coincide together. Because then you would be encouraged to make your profession of faith and be baptized. If I understand correctly, you can make a profession of faith and not be baptized. But you can't be baptized and then become a full member of the church without making a profession of faith. So there's an order there to it.
So you don't have, you can make a profession of faith and not be baptized.
Baptism is not a salvific event.
Right.
Baptism will not save you, and not being baptized will not be. If you don't get baptized, it's not going to send you to hell. So,
Isn't there a denomination though that baptizes their infants?
the Methodists do, the Episcopalians.
No, I'm talking about for their soul's sake.
Well, that's not a Christian denomination if we're thinking of the same one.
Okay.
Well, is that for salvation? Yeah, I don't think it would be for salvation. You want to add to this, Brother Jeff?
What?
You want to add to this?
Well, it's God claiming us, and it's prevenient grace. It's the grace that goes before us before we're even aware of God. God is wanting us, desiring us. That's the best way I look at it, as far as, why would you be baptized as a child and not be rebaptized? God's already done it. God's already claimed us. We may not live into that claim, but God doesn't remove that claim from us.
Okay.
So
Other
we're not
questions?
claimed by God right off the bat? No? Well, I thought there's an age where you are accountable.
There is an age where you're accountable. You make your own decision then to accept God's grace that He's already put on you. If you don't accept it, that's your choice.
Okay, but if I wasn't baptized as an infant then, you saying I don't have God's prevenient grace?
No, you have God's prevenient grace. But infant baptism is the best expression of God's prevenient grace that we have. You don't have to be baptized as a baby. You can be baptized as an adult.
This is a theological sermon that we're dealing with today. There have been volumes written on what the questions y'all are asking. I'm just trying to do my best to help. Am I making it worse, huh, Nancy? Is that what I'm doing? I'll take two more questions here. Confirmation, okay.
Yeah, my dad.
No, baptism is not required at confirmation. Normally the process goes, you're baptized as an infant, you undergo confirmation, at the end of confirmation, you then make your public profession of faith. If you've never been baptized at the end of confirmation, you're given an opportunity to make your public profession of faith and be baptized. But that's sort of the sequence of events, so to speak. Other questions?
This isn't a brand new topic. I've lived 71 years knowing my dad violently fought the second baptism of people. And actually, I think he had a sermon on that when Brad got baptized here 29 years ago. On that very thing.
Well, as a United Methodist minister, that's what I believe. That's, if you want to look at it, that's the party line, so to speak. But I agreed to that party line before I became a United Methodist minister. I knew that that's what the definitions were. I knew that that's how it was explained. And let me sermonize here. A lot of folks join denominations not clearly understanding what the denominations believe. And when they get there, they try to change the denomination to become what they've always thought it should. Denominations don't work that way. We have clearly defined sets of beliefs. We are not nearly as defined as some denominations, but on baptism and communion, we are pretty well defined as to what we believe the teachings of the church and the Bible are all about. And so, that's not, it may surprise you if you join the Methodist Church that's what we believe, but we are not going to change from what we have historically believed. And so, that's part of what I think is important to understand as well, that we've had this set of beliefs since the days of Wesley. It's not something new. And we are simply following through, I'm simply following through as a United Methodist pastor upon what Wesley told me to do. That this is what's required. This is how you, as a Methodist minister, will conduct yourself in this area of ministry. And so that's why, we can disagree on it, but, I'm United Methodist, and that's what I believe. And that's why I'm giving you this chance to ask these questions today, to help you understand that that is an important doctrine of our church, and you have the chance to hopefully maybe learn a little bit more about it. And I'm always open for questions, so if you don't agree with what I said today,